I'd been driving for almost 2 hours, hands clamped on the wheel, heart pounding harder the closer I got to Baltimore. I was supposed to be headed to the Marriott downtown, where my wife, Jessica, was staying for an insurance conference. But this wasn't some sweet, surprise my wife kind of night. Not even close. Honestly, if you think I was filled with love or excitement to see my wife, you'd be dead wrong. For the last 3 months, something inside me just shifted. I couldn't explain it at first. Call it intuition, call it paranoia, but every time Jessica packed for another business trip, training, or conference, my gut screamed that she wasn't just building her career, she was seeing someone else. Maybe more than just seeing. And tonight, I'd finally decided to find out the truth for myself. Here's the backstory. Jessica and I have been married for 14 years with 2 amazing kids. Emily is 12, Ryan is 10. We met in high school, the typical American love story. Football games, late-night milkshakes, making plans for the future. Jessica was the kind of girl everyone noticed. Tall, with a dancer's figure, long auburn hair, those sharp cheekbones, and that perfect smile. Even now, all these years and 2 kids later, she turns heads. I thought we had a strong, loyal marriage. I honestly did, until these last few months, when I started noticing little things that just didn't add up. Whispers on late-night calls, passwords changed on her phone, the careful way she'd avoid eye contact if I asked about her day. I never wanted to be that guy, the jealous, suspicious husband. I hate confrontation, and I kept telling myself I was imagining things. But tonight, the conference was just close enough that I had the perfect excuse to drop in. All smiles, Mr. Supportive. But I wasn't here to play the good husband. I was here to catch her if she was cheating. Red-handed, no more doubts. Before I left, I dropped Emily and Ryan at my mom's. I gave them each a hug and told them to be good, lying right to their faces about why Dad had to work late. And then I drove straight to the hotel, my mind replaying every odd moment from the last 3 months on a loop. Walking into the lobby at the Marriott, I tried to look casual. My briefcase felt like it weighed 50 pounds. At the reception, I forced a tight smile. "Hi, I'm David Carter. My wife Jessica Carter is here for the Summit Insurance Conference. Room 214. She said I could pick up the key." The clerk checked the computer, then gave me that polite, impersonal hotel smile. "Can I see your ID, sir?" "Absolutely, thanks for checking." I handed over my driver's license. He gave me the key card and a nod, and suddenly I was clutching it so tightly my knuckles turned white. My stomach was in knots. What if she really was in there with someone else? What if she was alone, and I'd just proven to myself that I was crazy? I rode the elevator up to the 2nd floor, trying not to think about all the ways this could blow up. At her door, I stood for a second, heart hammering. Do I knock? Do I just walk in? What if there's a security chain? What if she isn't even in the room? I took a breath, slid the key card into the slot as quietly as I could, and pushed the door open millimeter by millimeter, like a guy defusing a bomb. And what did I see? Jessica, sitting at the tiny desk, turned halfway toward the door with her laptop open and a stack of papers spread out everywhere. She must have felt me staring because she spun around and literally jumped out of her chair, hands over her heart. "Oh my God, David! You scared me half to death!" she gasped, more irritated than relieved. "What are you doing here?" I put on my best casual smile. "Hey, I had a little free time and thought I'd surprise you. See if you wanted to get dinner." She looked at me, heart still racing, then gave me a quick kiss. "You're staying the night, right? I could use a little company." For a second, the air between us softened. Maybe I'd gotten it all wrong. Maybe tonight would go a different way. And as she went to the bathroom to freshen up, she called over her shoulder, "Give me 10 minutes to shower, and then, who knows? Maybe we can have a little fun before dinner." I stood there in the hotel room, wondering if the whole investigation was just in my head, or if I was about to discover the truth that would change everything. She looked over her shoulder with a little grin. "How about a quick treat before I rinse off? After dinner, you'll have me for the rest of the night, however you want." Jessica could always turn on that playful, sultry charm when she wanted, and this time, I let myself believe, just for a second, that maybe I'd been wrong about her all along. I wanted to believe it. God, I needed to believe it. She undressed right there, tossing her clothes to the floor without a care in the world. Then, with that familiar sway in her hips, she dropped down in front of me, bold, unashamed, and confident as ever. Jessica had always known exactly how to please me. I'd never doubted her skill, and in that moment, every fear I'd carried for months just faded. For a few minutes, she made me forget all my suspicions, made me forget why I'd really come. By the time she finished, I was floating. She gave me a cocky little smile, stood up, and headed for the bathroom. "That should hold you until dinner," she teased, closing the door behind her as the shower started to run. I lay back on the bed, dazed and exhausted, letting myself relax for the first time all day. My headache had finally started to dull, but I decided to look for some aspirin in her makeup bag, just in case. I walked over to the dresser, unzipped the little pocket, and started rooting around. That's when I found it, a 6-pack of condoms. Just sitting there, wedged next to her lipstick and travel brush. I stared at them, heart pounding, mind racing, like the bottom had just dropped out of my life. Here's the thing, after our son Ryan was born, Jessica started having trouble with the pill. It made her sick, so I volunteered for a vasectomy. No more accidents, no more need for birth control. Condoms? They hadn't been in our lives for years. So why the hell were there condoms in her bag now, and in bulk? The realization hit me like a freight train. She was cheating. It wasn't just paranoia. It wasn't just in my head. All those little signs, all those months, it was real. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling sick. My hands were shaking, but my mind was already working overtime. Instead of confronting her, I reached back into her bag and found a couple of safety pins. Jessica always kept a few in there for emergencies. Without even thinking, I poked nearly invisible holes in the center of every condom, then tucked them back exactly where I'd found them. Some part of me wanted her to get caught, to have to explain herself. To anyone. Everyone. She was still singing in the shower, humming some pop tune like nothing in the world was wrong. I took out my phone and dialed my friend. "Hey Freddie, it's David. Can you do me a favor?" He didn't even hesitate. "What's up?" "I need you to call me in about an hour. Say there's a burst pipe at school and I'm needed right away. That's all. Just the call." Freddie chuckled. "You got it, man. See you around 7. When I hung up, I just sat there in a fog, not sure what my next move was. One thing was certain. I didn't want to spend the night with Jessica. Not now, not after what I'd found. The guilt about what we'd just done stung even deeper. All I could think about was how to keep it together. How not to explode and ruin everything right then and there. By the time she got out of the shower, I'd managed to put on a decent mask. The hardest part? Pretending nothing was wrong, acting like the loving, trusting husband while my whole world was falling apart inside. We walked down to the hotel restaurant together, Jessica chatting, smiling, acting like everything was perfect. But under the surface, everything had changed, and I was already plotting my escape. I was barely keeping it together. Every smile felt like a lie. Every glance at Jessica across the table reminded me of the 6-pack of condoms I'd found hours earlier in her makeup bag. I wanted to believe it meant nothing. I wanted to pretend she was the same woman I married. But the pit in my stomach had only grown heavier. "Order whatever you like, Jess," I told her, trying my best to keep my voice light, calm, controlled. "It's on me." She waved at the menu. "I'm not that hungry. Maybe just the petite filet." "Sounds good," I said, nodding. "Let's add a bottle of rosé, too." The waiter came, took our order, and walked away. For a moment, we sat in silence, her looking at the candle, me toying with my fork, forcing a smile. I had to test the waters. Gently, casually. "Jess?" I paused, watching her. "Are you happy? You know, with us?" She didn't even flinch. "Of course I am," she replied, smiling without hesitation. "I've got a beautiful home, 2 amazing kids, and a husband who still makes my heart race. What more could a woman want?" I nodded slowly. "Sometimes I just wonder if I'm doing everything I can to make you happy." "You silly man," she said, with a playful smirk. "You're perfect, Dave. Absolutely perfect. Why do you ask? Is that why you made the trip?" "Maybe," I said, managing a faint chuckle. The waiter returned with our meals, and from there, we talked about everything and nothing. Work, the kids, the neighbors, the new roof we'd need before winter. Jessica smiled, laughed, and touched my hand once or twice like she always did. And then my phone rang, right on time. I excused myself politely and walked into the hotel lobby to take the call. "Thanks, Freddie," I whispered into the phone after a pause. "You're a lifesaver." I returned to the table. "Emergency at school," I told Jessica. "Water pipe burst. They need me back, tonight." Disappointment flashed across her face. It was quick, maybe too quick. "Oh," she said, trying to hide it. "Well, that's too bad. I was looking forward to some time together. Guess I'll be spending the night alone again." My chest tightened. "Guess so," I said softly, swallowing down everything I wanted to scream. As we stepped into the elevator, the doors opened, and out walked him. Kirk Langford, tall, clean-cut, confident, the same guy who always ended up traveling with my wife. "Hey, Jessica," he said, stopping in his tracks. "I went by your room to see if you wanted to grab dinner, but now I see why you didn't answer." He turned to me, hand outstretched. "You must be David. I've heard a lot about you." I shook his hand. God help me. I shook his hand and smiled like some clueless idiot. "Nice to meet you." "Kirk, this is David, my husband," Jessica said, her voice suddenly softer. "He came to surprise me, but, of course, now he has to rush home. Looks like I'll be sleeping alone again," she added with a half-hearted sigh. The elevator doors closed behind us, and I could feel the air change between us. Thicker, colder. "I still think you should quit," I said, eyes forward. "We've talked about this," she snapped, her tone sharp now. "I like my job, and Kirk has taught me a lot. You really need to get over your jealousy, David." I didn't respond. What could I say? Back in the room, I grabbed my bag. Jessica tried to kiss me goodbye. It was quick, hollow. I drove home in silence, and I knew Kirk would be at her door within the hour. Maybe he'd bring wine. Maybe she'd already left it chilling. I couldn't bear to imagine it, but my brain wouldn't stop replaying every possibility. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I felt numb, burnt out. My head throbbed. My body was exhausted. And yet, I couldn't sleep, couldn't rest, couldn't breathe. I hated her. I loved her. I didn't know what I felt anymore. All I knew was that something had to change. Fast. I was left sitting with what I discovered in Baltimore. Numb, restless, unable to even invent a convincing reason not to sleep with my wife. The truth was, what I really wanted was a divorce, and the sooner, the better. But I had nothing solid. No smoking gun, nothing I could throw down in front of Megan and say, "Here, this is what you did." Not to mention, nothing that would hold up in court. It felt like I was being choked by my own helplessness. My wife was cheating, I knew it in my bones. But what could I actually do about it? I couldn't just confront her and lose everything on a hunch. I needed help. Real help. 2 days later, Megan came home, practically glowing. You'd think she was a kid who'd just been handed the perfect report card. I watched her breezing through the door, that high school smile lighting up her face, and all I could think was, she had a hell of a time at that conference. And not just the conference. When she went upstairs, I found a moment to check her purse. The same inside pocket as before. Of the 6 condoms I'd found, now only 1 remained. And yes, it still had my little pinhole. My stomach dropped. I didn't say a word. That night, sex with Megan was just a routine, a chore. There was no passion, no spark, just the hollow motions of something that used to be sacred. Saturday came with its own misery. The annual picnic for Globus Insurance, the company Megan worked for. At least the kids were excited. Sarah and Todd got to run wild with their friends. Me? I dreaded it. All day, I couldn't shake the feeling that people around me knew, that I was the joke of the office, the poor sap getting played while everyone shared private glances and inside smirks. Was it real, or was I just being paranoid? I couldn't say. But I couldn't risk it, so I kept a low profile, lurking on the edges and trying not to draw any more attention than necessary. Meanwhile, Megan? She was in her element, laughing, joking, shining in every circle. But especially around Kirk. They weren't openly inappropriate, but there was a comfort, a familiarity, a closeness in their banter that made my skin crawl. Neither of them even bothered to acknowledge me. Oddly enough, I preferred it that way. For now. I was wallowing in my own private misery when a voice interrupted me from behind. "Hi, I'm Janet Langford. You must be Phil Jenkins." I turned around and, honestly, almost forgot how to speak. Janet was stunning. I mean, movie star beautiful. Long brown hair, sparkling blue eyes, an hourglass figure that somehow managed to be both elegant and intimidating. For a second, all I could think was, why would Kirk cheat on her? "Sorry, you caught me daydreaming," I managed, probably blushing like a teenager. "Yes, I'm Phil. Nice to meet you. Can we talk? Somewhere a little quieter, away from the kids and all the noise?" she asked, glancing toward the rowdy crowd. "Of course. Let's walk down by the lake." I pointed to a quiet stretch just out of earshot from everyone else. "I doubt anyone will miss us." She smiled, polite but distracted. "Me neither," she said with a little wave. We found a bench with a perfect view of the water. Janet sat, took a breath, and looked at me, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "I'm all ears," I said quietly. "What's on your mind?" Janet hesitated. "This is hard for me," she admitted. "I'm not sure how to say it, but it's a sensitive subject." I didn't want to make it harder for her, so I just put it out there. "You mean the affair between Kirk and my wife?" She looked almost relieved. "Yeah, that. I only found out myself a few days ago." I nodded. "Same here." Her eyes softened. "I've known about it for a couple of months now. I'm getting ready to file for divorce. I even hired a detective to get proof. But my lawyer says that I'd have a much better chance in court if Megan agreed to testify, or at least sign a notarized statement confirming the affair. That kind of direct evidence is hard to dispute." She paused, glancing at me with those piercing blue eyes. "I've already got photographs, phone records, and some pretty damning voicemails. No video yet, but the detective is still working on it. Plus, I've tracked every date and time they met up. I've got a log that would make you sick." She curled her lips with distaste, shaking her head as if trying to chase away the images. I nodded, my mind racing. "If there's any way I can help, let me know. Maybe your lawyer could use some of your evidence for my divorce case too. Because right now I've got nothing but suspicion. I need something, anything, solid." Janet gave a resolute nod. "Absolutely. I'll talk to my lawyer and see what we can do. I'm also suing Globus. My attorney already has statements from employees who confirm some managers knew about the affair and did nothing to stop it. We're going after them for negligence. I plan to make them choose, either fire Kirk and Megan or face a 7-figure lawsuit." I couldn't help but whistle, half in admiration, half in awe. "I can't believe how together you are about this," I said honestly. "You're amazing." She managed a wry smile. "Tomorrow, Kirk's playing golf all morning. Why don't you come by my place around noon? I'll show you everything I have, and we'll figure out how to move forward. Together." "Yeah, sure," I agreed, a little flustered by her intensity and her beauty. "Where do you live?" 26 Hemlock Avenue, Crestmont, she replied, her voice softening. "Don't worry, it's not a date, but it's nice not to feel alone in this for once." We laughed, and for the first time since Baltimore, I felt like maybe I wasn't totally lost. The next morning, true to form, Megan announced she needed to run some errands, meaning she'd be gone for a few hours. Once she was out, I dropped the kids off at my mom's and made my way to Crestmont. Janet greeted me at the door, all business, and led me into her home office, a stylish modern space with a plush leather sofa and a massive computer monitor dominating one wall. "Drink? I've got beer, soda, or wine," she offered. "Soda, if you have it. Or Pepsi." She handed me a cold can, then motioned to the sofa. "Get comfortable. In a few minutes, you'll see Kirk in action at the golf course, live and in full color. Cost me $1,400 to set this up, but the best part? I charged it all to Kirk's own credit card." She grinned. a trace of dark humor flashing across her face. "We'll get a full DVD copy when it's done. You're welcome to a copy. Although, trust me, I doubt you'll ever want to watch it again." I grimaced, but admitted, "As much as it hurts, I have to see it. I need to know." While the screen showed nothing interesting for the first 20 minutes, Janet kept me distracted, walking me through the stack of evidence she'd compiled. Dates, times, photos, emails, and phone logs. My heart twisted as I realized how thorough she'd been, how much proof there really was. I felt both grateful for her help and totally gutted by what I was learning. Now I knew exactly what, when, and how Megan was betraying me. I was surprised to find out that the Langfords had not one, but 3 large koi ponds in their backyard. During our conversation, I mentioned that I'd love to see them sometime and asked Janet if I could bring my kids over to visit and maybe admire the fish. She looked genuinely pleased and told me she'd be happy to invite us over and that Sarah and Todd would be welcome anytime. Around then, the monitor in Janet's office flickered with movement. We both quieted down as the live feed kicked into action. Just as Janet predicted, Kirk and Megan entered the motel room. There was no conversation, no pretense, just immediate undressing, and they were in bed together within moments. The camera angle caught everything. The video quality was sharp, the audio a bit garbled, but honestly, I didn't care about the sound. The images on the screen left no doubt. There it was. Crystal clear, undeniable proof of Megan's affair. The kind of evidence that hits you right in the chest. Watching my wife so openly, passionately with another man, her colleague, while I sat next to his wife, was surreal. Awkward didn't even begin to describe it. I couldn't watch much longer. I felt sick. Turning away from the screen, I looked at Janet. "Do we have to sit through all of this?" I muttered, half pleading. Janet glanced over with a sympathetic look. "No, we've seen more than enough. Besides, it's all recorded for the lawyers. We don't have to put ourselves through any more than this." I let out a long breath. Honestly, it's not exactly my idea of entertainment. There was a moment of shared silence, an unspoken understanding between us. We were both hurting, both betrayed, and now forced to confront it in high definition. "Would you like to see the koi ponds now?" Janet offered gently, her face lighting up a little as she shifted the mood. "Absolutely," I said, almost grateful for the distraction. "I'm pretty sure your koi are more interesting than—" "Well, that." Janet grinned, and we walked out back. The screen's audio, Megan's unmistakable voice, still echoing faintly as we stepped into the sunlight. Outside, I found myself genuinely impressed by the elaborate network of ponds, the complex filtration systems, and Janet's evident passion for her hobby. I told her I'd worked as a plumber before I took my school job, and before I knew it, we were discussing pipes and pumps, and all the technical details that kept her koi thriving. Janet told me that Kirk had never cared for any of this, and that she always had to hire people to help with installation or repairs. Without thinking, I offered to help out anytime Kirk was away golfing. Not to flirt, but because I genuinely wanted to learn more, and to lend a hand to someone who, I realized, had become a friend. A few hours passed before we noticed the time. We wandered back inside to find the motel room on the monitor now empty, the evidence safely recorded for the lawyers. It was time for me to leave, and Janet promised to call the next time Kirk was out for golf so I could bring Sarah and Todd to see the koi. The weeks that followed weren't easy. Every time Megan took a shower, I found myself checking her purse. There always seemed to be a new pack of condoms in that hidden pocket. It drove me crazy, not knowing when or how she managed to use them up so fast. My only comfort was the tiny expropriated safety pin now on my keychain. I used it every time, poking nearly invisible holes in the new condoms, as if somehow this might force the truth out sooner. I was living in a strange sort of limbo, waiting for Megan to make a mistake big enough to bring everything to light. At home, Sarah and Todd talked endlessly about their visits to the lady with all the pretty fish, showing Megan their drawings and excitedly telling her about the koi ponds. Megan would smile, but never seemed interested, never made the connection between Janet, the koi owner, and Kirk's wife. If anything, She seemed relieved that the kids' stories were innocent and that her own secret life hadn't caught up with her yet. I'd become the perfect distraction for Megan, keeping the kids busy and out of her way while she snuck off for her time with Kirk, her sex maestro. I made 2 more desperate attempts to convince her to quit her job and distance herself from Kirk, but each time she refused. The second time was especially brutal. Her tone was icy, and the things she said stung more than I expected. I guess, in some ways, her mocking comments about my masculinity just made it easier for me to justify the steps I'd started taking. They gave me a reason to stop doubting myself. Then, late Tuesday night, Megan finally dropped the bomb I'd been expecting. "Phil, I'm feeling too stressed lately. I need a break. I'm gonna take a few days off and go visit Nancy, probably for about a week." She looked at me, waiting for a reaction. "Would you mind watching the kids while I recharge?" Her voice dripped with sweetness, but it was so fake, I almost laughed. Instead, I played my part. "Of course, I get it. You've been working so much overtime, staying late at the office, always thinking about the family. Honestly, a few days away will probably do you more good than any therapy could." I managed to smile. "Go, enjoy yourself. I'll handle everything here." Megan's relief was obvious. "Thank you, honey. I really do just need to get my head straight. All this overtime is for us, but yeah, I think I went a little too far." She leaned in, kissed my cheek, and started packing almost immediately. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept spinning over everything I needed to do, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. Finally, it was time to act. Megan's sister Nancy lived about 3 hours away with her husband Brad. Brad was a good guy, though everyone knew he'd jump at Nancy's command. The most interesting thing about their town, though, there were 2 clinics that offered abortion services, and I already had the names, addresses, and hours written down. I'd done my homework. Both clinics required a 2-day prep period for the procedure, meaning Megan's earliest possible appointment would be Friday if she started on Wednesday. I figured she'd want to get everything over with as quickly as possible, so she'd have some time to recover before coming home. That gave me just a day and a half to finalize my own plans. No problem. As soon as Megan was gone, I started moving. Talked to my parents. Hard to admit how badly my marriage had fallen apart, but they understood. And the kids were happy to stay with Grandma and Grandpa. Dad's pickup would be perfect for moving Megan's things out when the time came. Next, I called my lawyer. He said the divorce papers were ready. I could pick them up Thursday morning. Janet's lawyer was just as efficient. Kirk would be served at the same time Megan got her own set of documents. I had everything lined up except for one thing. I felt like I owed Megan a last chance, a final opportunity to come clean or at least to make things right. But honestly, I had no faith that she would. Dad and I spent the rest of the day quietly packing up Megan's stuff. Thursday morning, after a long drive, I found myself in front of the first clinic. It was closed. No surprise, my research said it was hit or miss on hours. That left only one other option, the Family Planning Center. I parked, walked in, and approached the front desk, trying to look as confident and calm as I could. "Good morning, my name is Phil Jenkins. My wife Megan said I'd need to come sign some consent form." The woman at the desk looked a bit confused. "What kind of form?" "I'm not sure of the exact name. I think it's the one where I acknowledge everything that's happening with my wife and agree not to sue or something like that." She tapped her keyboard, scanning the computer. "Let me check. Megan Jenkins, right?" "That's right. Do you need my ID, or—" She shook her head, still typing. "Looks like her sister already signed as her support person. But it would really be better to have your signature. Hang on, let me grab her file." She disappeared into the back, and my heart started pounding. Bingo! All I had to do now was keep my cool for just a few more minutes. The receptionist slid a consent form toward me and pointed out where to sign, right below Nancy's signature. I glanced at the paperwork. The procedure was scheduled for 11 a.m. Friday, with instructions to arrive an hour early. "Do we owe anything else for this?" I asked, taking my checkbook from my jacket and setting it on the counter. She shook her head. "No, your wife already paid the full amount, $800 in cash. You're all set." I thanked her, forcing a polite smile. then stepped outside with a weird sense of relief. This wasn't the outcome I'd ever wanted for my marriage, but it was a clear sign. Megan had made her decisions, and now I was making mine. When I showed up at Nancy and Brad's house, the reception was almost comically over the top. Both sisters acted surprised. Maybe too surprised. "Phil, what a wonderful surprise! What are you doing here?" Megan gushed, eyes wide with fake delight. I kept my expression easy and innocent. "Mom and Dad took the kids for a few days, so I figured I'd take a little sick leave, swing by, and spend some time with you guys. I guess I needed a break too." For a moment, the room went totally silent. I could see the gears spinning in both Megan's and Nancy's minds, trying to work out what to do next. Nancy was the first to move. She shot Brad a look, and together they ducked into the kitchen, leaving me alone with Megan, who tried to fill the awkward gap with a stream of pointless small talk. A couple of minutes later, Brad reemerged, this time on his own, doing his best to sound upbeat. "Phil, I have a great idea. Let's take tomorrow off, borrow my buddy Jack's boat, and hit the lake for some fishing. The perch are running strong this time of year. We'll have some beers, get out of the ladies' hair for a while. What do you say?" Brad looked almost desperate for me to go along with his plan. No doubt, straight from Nancy's playbook. "Sounds tempting, Brad," I said, keeping my tone light. "Nothing like a calm day on the water to wash away your worries. Check with Jack. If he's in, I'm in." You could almost feel the relief ripple through the room. The rest of the evening was spent in casual conversation. Nobody mentioned anything serious, and sex was off the table. Megan made it clear she wasn't interested, and besides, she'd never risk her sister overhearing anything indecent. Next morning, the weather was perfect. Blue sky, warm sun, and Jack pulled up early in his pickup with the boat in tow. Brad busied himself in the kitchen, loading up a cooler with beer and snacks. As we carried gear out to the truck, he looked over his shoulder. "You coming or what? Fish won't catch themselves." I stopped at the open passenger door and met his gaze. "You know what, Brad? I'm gonna sit this one out." He blinked in surprise. "I think you and Jack should enjoy a day off. You probably won't want to be around Nancy for the next few hours." He tried to convince me to come along, but I wouldn't budge. When he started to push, I had to get blunt, using a few choice words and some not-so-subtle threats. Eventually, he gave up. Jack and Brad climbed into the truck, and with a squeal of tires, they were gone. I headed back inside, poured myself a strong coffee, and got to work. First order of business: track down Nancy's cell phone and power it off. Couldn't risk any surprise texts or calls ruining the next phase of my plan. I grabbed the landline and called my dad. He's always up before sunrise. We ended up talking for nearly 2 hours, mostly about everything and nothing, but it helped me steady my nerves. While we talked, call waiting beeped at least 6 times. No doubt Brad was desperately trying to get in touch with Nancy. He kept calling, and I kept ignoring it, making sure she was completely out of reach. Finally, the noise upstairs told me both sisters were up and moving. Time for the fireworks. Before I faced the morning showdown, I cleared Brad's missed calls from the answering machine and switched Nancy's phone back on. By my count, the sisters were supposed to be at the family planning center in under 2 hours. I had 5 minutes left before I'd be face-to-face with 2 very pissed-off women. I poured myself another cup of coffee, set a fresh pot to brew for the ladies, and sat at the kitchen table, ready for whatever came next. Megan was the first one down. She came to a dead stop in the kitchen doorway, eyes wide. "Phil, what the hell are you doing here?" I shrugged, keeping my tone casual. Didn't feel like spending all day fishing with Brad and Jack, that's all. Figured I'd hang out with my lovely wife and her sister instead. I was thinking we could go grab lunch, just the 3 of us. Maybe check out some local places? Megan and Nancy exchanged a lightning-fast look, then both started protesting at once, voices rising in a chorus of objections. No, this won't work. We already have plans." Nancy shot Megan a look and then bolted from the kitchen, speed-dialing Brad as she went. Megan slumped into a chair like the weight of the world had just crashed down on her. "Phil, I don't want to fight about this," she said, trying to steady her voice, but I could hear the panic simmering underneath. "Nancy and I just have a lot to do today. Please, just let us have our day." I shrugged again, palms raised. "Fine, just tell me your plans." If I don't like them, I'll do something else. You've got the whole week together. I'm just asking for a few hours. Unless, of course, you two are sneaking off to meet some guys behind my back." I grinned, tossing it out like a joke, even though it wasn't. Megan bristled, her temper flaring. "No, we're not meeting any guys. We just want to go shopping, maybe buy a few things, girl stuff, bras, panties, some sexy nightgowns. We don't want you tagging along and watching us try things on." I nodded, keeping my face straight. "Well, most of those stores are in the mall, right? I'll go wander around, check out some shops myself. When you're done, we'll meet up and have a nice lunch. No big deal. You won't even know I'm there." Nancy reappeared in the doorway, looking like she'd just bitten into a lemon, but she didn't say a word, waiting for Megan's lead. For a moment, my wife just fidgeted, looking back and forth between us, realizing she wasn't going to win this one. Finally, she let out a long sigh, squared her shoulders, and said, "Fine, Phil. You can come, but you'd better not make this any more difficult than it already is." It was all falling into place. Now, I just needed to see how far they'd go to keep up their lies, or if the truth would finally break through. "I need to get dressed," Megan announced, her voice clipped, and swept out of the kitchen, barely missing Nancy in the doorway. Nancy shot me a glare. "You're a real boring ass, you know that?" she spat, then turned on her heel and followed her sister upstairs. I couldn't help it. A wide, satisfied grin broke across my face. Let them stew. I'd thrown a real wrench into their plans. For the next 20 minutes, the house echoed with the sounds of hurried footsteps and muffled muttering from the bedrooms above. At one point, the call light on the house phone lit up. Someone was calling out. I bet anything they were on the phone with Planned Parenthood trying to reschedule. I checked the clock. They had just under an hour before Megan's original appointment. I figured if they tried to sneak out, I'd just follow them and make sure they saw me tailing the whole way. But honestly, I doubted they'd risk it with me still around. 20 minutes later, both sisters came down, acting like nothing was out of the ordinary. "Okay, Phil, let's go shopping. We're ready," Megan said with faux cheer. I played along, but I was watching every move. The call upstairs was almost certainly to reschedule. Now that I'd told them I was staying the whole day, they'd just bide their time until I was out of the picture. I wasn't trying to stop Megan from making her decision. I just wanted her to have to work for it, to not let her coast through this betrayal so easily. On our way out, I insisted we take my car. I didn't need the Sisters Act dumping me somewhere along the highway while they ran off to finish their secret business. The drive was pure tension. After a few miles, I deliberately pulled into the nearest service station. I took my sweet time, filled the tank, checked the oil and wiper fluid, even scrubbed the windshield spotless. All the while, I watched the sisters squirm in the front seat, barely hiding their irritation. It was childish, but God, it felt good. At the mall, I parked as far away from the entrance as possible. "Let's walk," I said, knowing every extra minute counted. Once inside, I kept my distance but never lost sight of them. They tried to act casual, browsing, picking up a few things, but most of their time was spent in heated, whispered conversation, wild hand gestures betraying their stress. They were trying to put on a show for me, but I wasn't fooled for a second. The best part? As I tracked them from one store to the next, I watched the clock tick past the time of Megan's appointment at the clinic. My plan had worked. I couldn't stop what was coming, but at least I'd made it harder. That was enough for now. Shortly after noon, we regrouped at the mall's central courtyard just like I'd arranged. We ate lunch at Olive Garden. Conversation was minimal, and the mood was icy. Megan and Nancy were fuming, but I couldn't help grinning to myself. They hated me right then, but frankly, I didn't care. Sometimes victory isn't pretty, but it's still victory. When we finally got back to Nancy and Brad's, I grabbed a couple cold beers from the fridge and collapsed on the couch, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. Soon after, Brad staggered in from his fishing trip, only to be greeted by a half-hour tirade from Nancy. The poor guy barely survived the barrage before sneaking back out, ears practically curled from the scolding. After dinner, once the kids and Brad had finished with the dishes, I asked if I could talk to Jessica privately in the kitchen. Linda just gave me one of those tight, knowing grins, then hustled Steve out to the living room. It was obvious from Jessica's posture. Shoulders tight, eyes narrowed, hair pulled back so tight she looked years older. that she was still furious over everything that happened that day. I could almost feel the wall of resentment between us, and I knew having a calm conversation wasn't going to be easy. I started in quietly, trying to keep my voice steady, almost gentle. "Jessica, I'm going to ask you again. Will you please quit your job and stop seeing Brandon Cooper?" Even before I finished, her jaw clenched, cheekbones flexing, her fingers curling so tight on the table, I half expected her to snap something. "For God's sake, David, I don't want to hear that crap anymore," she spat, low and venomous, barely able to hold back. "I'm sick of you harping on this. I am not going to sit here and answer your stupid questions again. You know the answer, and it hasn't changed. It's not going to. So change the record or get the hell out." Her eyes blazed, pure, angry, defiance. I just nodded, no drama, and reached for the big manila envelope I'd left beside me. From inside it, I pulled out a second, smaller envelope and slid it across the table toward her. "Jessica, I've asked you this at least 10 times over the last 2 months. You refuse. Every single time. I warned you what would happen. So here are the divorce papers." I tapped the envelope gently. "All you have to do is sign and mail them in the stamped return envelope. If you want a lawyer to look them over, you have that right." She stared at me for a long second, then leaned forward, bracing her hands on the table, looming over me with that cold, hard look. "You stupid son of a bitch," she whispered, voice trembling with rage. "You can't just divorce me because you don't like my job or my friends. If you want a divorce, you need a real reason, and you don't have one." She pushed away from the table, folding her arms across her chest, sitting straight-backed, her whole body rigid with defiance. I took a breath, steadied my hands. "Jessica, why did you come visit Linda this week?" My voice was low, even, deliberate. She rolled her eyes and snapped back. "Are you serious right now?" "You know exactly why. I told you before I left." She tried to sound casual, but there was something forced about it. "That's not true, and you know it," I said, my tone flat. "So what's the real reason?" She glared at me, sarcastic smile twisted on her lips. "If you're so damn smart, why don't you tell me?" "Fine," I replied, not raising my voice, not letting it show how much this was eating at me. "Why did you and Linda go to Planned Parenthood on Wednesday?" The kitchen went dead silent. Jessica shrank back, her posture suddenly smaller, almost vulnerable. She fidgeted in her seat, eyes darting anywhere but mine. I pressed, my voice dropping lower. "What did you pay Planned Parenthood $800 in cash for?" I could see the hit land. For a moment, she looked like she might be sick. "What are you talking about?" she muttered, voice barely audible. I leaned forward, not letting up, my face close to hers, quiet but relentless. "Why did you have an appointment at Planned Parenthood at 11 in the morning? What exactly were they supposed to do for you for that $800? Her mouth worked, but no sound came out. She just stared past me, like she was trying to disappear. "Jessica, I'm not going to stop asking," I said. "I know about the payment, I know about the appointment. Are you really going to keep lying to my face? Why don't you just tell me the truth?" "God, would you just stop?" She finally exploded, her voice trembling between anger and something almost like fear. "You have no idea what you're talking about. It's none of your damn business what I was doing there or why." But she was already cornered, and we both knew it. Jessica's anger flared, her eyes wide, voice climbing, all composure gone. "You're unbelievable," she hissed, trying to sound tough, but it only made her seem more desperate. "Jessica," I cut in quietly but firmly, "you and I both know what Planned Parenthood is for. Everybody in this town knows it. And since I had a vasectomy years ago, by your request might I remind you, how could you possibly need an abortion? Care to explain?" She tried for a smirk, but it wobbled. "Maybe your little operation wasn't as successful as you think," she shot back. "Maybe you should get yourself checked out." I didn't blink. Calmly, I slid a second envelope across the table. "Here are 3 separate lab reports, 2 months ago, 1 month ago, and from last week. All from different clinics. All say the same thing. I'm shooting blanks. 0 chance." I stared straight at her. "Now, Jessica, unless you have a Planned Parenthood report showing you aren't pregnant, I'd love to see it. She glared at me, knuckles white on the table. You really are a son of a bitch, she spat, but I could see her resolve starting to crack. Still doesn't mean you can just file for divorce because you're paranoid. You can't prove I did anything. Oh, really? My voice finally started to rise, the months of quiet fury bubbling up. Why not just admit it, Jessica? You and Brandon Cooper, 6 months at least. We're both adults. Just stop with the lies. She shot up in her chair, defensive, shaking with rage. You have no evidence. I haven't done anything with anyone but you. I don't want to sit here and listen to you rant about something that never happened. So you never slept with Brandon Cooper? I asked quietly. No, she exploded. I'm your wife. I've only been with you. I looked at her for a long, hard second, then said, So how exactly did you end up pregnant? Divine intervention? The silence was suffocating. Jessica bit her lip, brows knitted, unable to meet my eyes. She couldn't answer. There was only one way out, and she knew it. Did you? I started to ask, but she cut me off. No, I didn't do that. It came out so fast, so desperate, it was almost laughable. I shook my head and calmly pulled out a stack of photos from my envelope, high def, in living color, leaving nothing to the imagination. Then what do you call these? I spread them out, one by one, watching her face drain of all color. Her voice barely a whisper. Where did you? I'm not done. I laid out another half-dozen photos, all of her and Brandon, together in every possible configuration. Still want to tell me nothing happened? I asked. Her bravado snapped. She screamed, Stop! That's enough! Damn it, enough! She was shaking, half rising out of her seat. Fine! You were spying on me? God, you're a mean, disgusting son of a bitch. Why didn't you just confront me like a man? All you ever do is sneak around, take pictures like some pathetic pervert. I'm sick of your whining. At that exact moment, my phone rang. I picked it up, kept my voice cool. Hey, Dad. Okay, 10 minutes, perfect. Thanks for calling. I hung up, meeting Jessica's wild, cornered gaze. She stared, panic starting to set in. What is this, David? It means, I said, standing, that my dad's already on his way to pick up your things and bring them over to Linda's. He'll be here in about 10 minutes. And just so you know, I had the locks changed at the house. If there's anything you forgot to pack, let me know. I'll send it over. Jessica was frozen, jaw clenched, eyes brimming with a mixture of shock and fury. I reached into my envelope one last time. Here's the paperwork for your car. Copies of the documents, half the money from our joint accounts, about $1,200, I slid the envelope across the table. As for the kids, here's what I propose. You'll have visitation every other weekend, and once a month, you can stay overnight if you sign a notarized statement admitting to your relationship with Brandon Cooper. Her silence said everything. This was the end. I almost forgot. One last thing. I lifted a finger, a sort of hold that thought moment, and reached for the last piece of my evidence. Jessica, before you storm out of here, there's a DVD I haven't shown you yet. It's a recording of you and Brandon Cooper at the Sunrise Motel, May 10th. The whole 2-hour event. Front row seats, everything you two did together, in all the angles these photos couldn't capture. I gathered up the stack of pictures from the table, waved them once for effect, then dropped them in front of her. For the record, I didn't take any of these shots myself. I honestly don't care what you and Brandon did together, but I will never forgive you for making a fool out of me. So here, keep these as a little souvenir of what's left of our love. Then, slowly and deliberately, I unclipped the safety pin from my car keys and set it on the table between us. She looked at it, confused, a touch of fear in her eyes. What the hell is this? I gave her a cold little smile. That, Jessica, is the safety pin I've been using to poke tiny holes in all your condoms for the past 2 months. Just figured you should know. Funny, you've gone through nearly 4 dozen of them with Brandon in just a couple weeks. He's been getting a hell of a lot more action from you than I ever did. He's one lucky guy, huh? Her face twisted in rage and shock. You are seriously sick. That's the dirtiest thing I've ever heard of. You're a real piece of shit, David. No, Jess, the dirtiest thing is screwing around behind your husband's back with a coworker. I might be a bastard, but you're the one who blew up our family. Just then, I heard the crunch of tires outside, my dad's truck. I stood up, dropped the pin on top of the manila envelope, and gathered my things. I gotta run. Looks like your ride's here. I paused in the doorway, glancing back at her one last time. By the way, never heard a single apology from you. Not once. I don't think you deserve to be my wife. Goodbye, Jessica, and good luck with whatever you decide to do next. As I walked out, I could hear her sobbing behind me. Linda rushed from the living room to comfort her sister, and Steve followed me out onto the porch. "What the hell, man?" Steve whispered, grabbing my arm. 14 years together. You're really just going to throw it all away over one mistake? Steve, do you even know why Jessica came to visit you and Linda? I shot back, pulling my arm free. He looked down at his feet, silent, then quietly offered to help me unload my dad's truck. We worked in silence, Megan's crying echoing from the kitchen. And honestly, I didn't care anymore. The fallout came quickly. Both Jessica and Brandon were fired from Summit Insurance the next week. Jessica refused to sign any admission of guilt, but Charlotte's lawyer said he had more than enough to win in court. After that day, Jessica disappeared from my life. She didn't even try to see the kids, but they adjusted, spending more time with Charlotte and her kids, almost like one big family. For months, Charlotte and I kept things strictly platonic, both of us wanting to keep our divorces clean and avoid complicating things for the children. 4 months later, both divorces were final. Jessica never fought the inevitable, but Brandon Cooper tried every trick in the book, lost his house, his savings, and wound up paying massive alimony. Just before Christmas, Jessica showed up at our door with gifts for Emily and Ryan. I kept things polite for the kids' sake, and after 2 quiet hours, she left. Shortly after New Year's, I put the house up for sale, and 2 months later, the kids and I moved in with Charlotte. Last I heard, Brandon took a job in Omaha, and Jessica followed. 4 months later, Brandon ghosted her. He just disappeared off the map, left her stranded. She moved back in with Linda after Steve took a job on the Alaska oil pipeline and sent Linda divorce papers. Funny how life works. These 2 sisters, both left behind. Meanwhile, Charlotte and I, well, the kids love her, she loves them, and we're planning our June wedding. After everything, I guess there's some truth to the old saying, life experience is the best teacher. It charges a hell of a price, but the lesson always sticks.